welcome everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here to talk about the metaverse with someone who knows a lot about it, Dr. Yaser Sheikh, who works in the virtual reality labs, directs it at Meta, and is also been working in this area at Carnegie Mellon for many, many years. So welcome, Yaser, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Ayesha. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for joining as well.
So Yaser, let's really start off from where it all started, from Pakistan. आप हमें जरा बताएंगे, like, you know, where you started, your schooling, and then how you ended up where you are today at really the cutting edge of an industry everyone is talking about.
Certainly. So actually, I spent the first 17 years of my life in Abu Dhabi. That's where I grew up.
Right.
Obviously, went back to Pakistan every summer to spend time with family. But it was for my undergraduate that when we started looking, we applied everywhere. My parents particularly wanted me to, have a connection back home as well. So they encouraged me strongly to consider GIK. At that point, it was, I think, maybe 4 or 5 years old. But I think it had the first batch of students had just graduated, and they'd gone to Microsoft, Schlumberger, multinationals, and probably the reputation of GIK at that point was at its zenith. So I went there, and I think those were 4 of the most wonderful years of my life in GIK. It's kind of tucked in the middle of nowhere, but that kind of made it a lot more kind of personal in terms of the connections and relationships built. I actually met my wife there as well.
Wow, okay.
And the thing was, at that time, what I remember is the average quality of the student at GIK, much more even than the faculty. The student was extraordinarily high, and there's something about at that age to be surrounded by such a concentration of talent and ambition. It was really formative. From there, it happened to be that there's a professor in Orlando at UCF, Professor Mubarak Shah. He had been visiting home, and what he would do is he'd sort of tour the country almost, giving lectures at different universities. And I had sort of started using Adobe Photoshop, and I really found it fascinating how it worked. And he was giving a lecture on it. I attended. And asked him a few interesting questions, and he had actually hired a few students from GIK before, from the first batch and from a couple of other batches as well. And so he was looking to expand the group, and he invited me to join him. It just happenstance. I mean, he just happened to visit. I just happened to attend his lecture. He just happened to invite me. And that's how I started doing my PhD. It was very different for me. Doing a PhD versus an undergraduate. I really felt like research, the ambiguity of it, that really somehow clicked with my personality. And it was again, I was very fortunate because even though UCF itself is not ideal, but Mubarak himself, he was fiercely ambitious. Like, he was very, very ambitious. He really wanted to build one of the best, if not the best, groups in the world. And the students he had gathered, Suhaib Khan from batch 1, Umar Javed, who was from batch 4, Ghulam Shafiq, he was from NED. He had really picked up, talented students from all over the country, and he'd got them together, not just from Pakistan, from other places as well. And once again, I found myself surrounded by folks whom I just learned so much from at that time. And then so it so turned out that Mubarak would invite prominent researchers to his to the university. And he invited Takeo Kanade. He's one of the most prominent researchers in computer vision. And once again, I attended his lecture, asked him a few questions, and he invited me to come and do a postdoc at Carnegie Mellon. And I had nothing better to do, so I said, sure, I'll drop by. And so I did a postdoc with him, and that's how I ended up at Carnegie Mellon. He asked me to stay after the postdoc as faculty, and so that's how I joined.
That's amazing. Actually, Yaser, I've been consistently impressed with GIK alumni. Not only is so many of the alumni are doing interesting things, but it's a very close-knit community. Maybe because you guys are a little far away from kind of the main, the hustle and bustle. It's been very impressive how this group has now launched Park Launch as well. So you were at Carnegie Mellon. Now you've done your PhD in computer vision, right? And now you're at the next stage after your postdoc. And then how do you end up from there really in the depths of what is virtual reality at that time when it was probably, very, very early on? And then when did you start thinking about what you call kind of photorealistic telepresence? And what does that even mean, basically?
Yeah, my entry into it is a little bit interesting. So as you mentioned, my area of specialty is computer vision. So that's kind of getting machines to see and understand images, and rather not just images, but the scenes behind the images. And increasingly over the years, we've been getting better at doing things like object recognition, scene recognition, understanding what objects and scenes they are. But the most sort of complex object of greatest interest to us, and therefore also to machines, are people, right? That's the thing. And I would say even we haven't mastered the art of understanding people yet. And so getting machines to do it has been a challenge. My entry point was there's something called an NSF expedition. So this is one of the biggest programs that the National Science Foundation in the US funds. And there's a professor, a colleague of mine at Georgia Tech, who had started an expedition on what he called behavioral computational science. And this was the sort of conceit of this, or the thesis of it, was centered around behavioral diseases or conditions, let's say, like dyslexia or autism. And the motivating example was he mentioned kids below the age of 2. So if autism is detected before the age of 2, then there are actually fairly effective treatments that can be administered or given to the child, and they can sort of develop much more neurotypically. But the problem is that it is actually very difficult to diagnose a child below 2, and they're very rarely diagnosed even by experts. And the thought was, what if we had machines that were trained to actually pick up on the markers that kids were signaling to other people? And this was kind of the motivation of the work. I got involved in this, and we spent maybe 3 or 4 years on this project. This is maybe 2006, 2007. What struck me was the entire expedition was, I would say, on the face of it, a full failure, meaning we were able to produce almost nothing of value at the end. And it's instructive because what the expedition didn't produce anything, but it launched many junior professors to think about these problems. Not just myself, but there are a couple of researchers at USC, at UIUC, UIUC and others. I myself built something called the Panoptic Studio. So this was, from a single camera, we just weren't getting the signals. So we built this large capture studio with 500 cameras, just to kind of extract what is that signal that people are exhibiting, or kids are also exhibiting. That was my kind of entry into this area of trying to understand through machine intuition what people are actually doing and why they're behaving the way they are. I mean, I think, clear that communication isn't just what you say. It's your facial expressions, it's your body language, it's your hand gestures. And a lot of that kind of content was what was missing from not just what those kids would extract from other people, but ironically what the machines were able to extract from people as well. So that was my entry into this area of people.
Right, trying to understand kind of emotions and behavior, and that's what you're calling signals, right, or biomarkers.
Yes. I mean, it's there's an interesting quote by an eminent anthropologist, Edward Sapir, and he says that it's a code that's written nowhere, known to no one, but understood by everyone.
Yeah.
It's a secret code. Okay, right. So you can, if you ask people to describe in words what that smirk means, or what the raised eyebrow means, or what the shoulder means, you can't really describe in words. There's no vocabulary for it. Emotions are a very sort of coarse vocabulary for this, but we all understand it in some intuitive way. Machines don't understand it, and folks who oftentimes are not neurotypical in their behavior, they don't understand it either. So part of this is trying to understand what it means. What's the taxonomy of this? What's the syntax of it? What's the grammar of it? Anyway, I was thinking about these problems when at that time, Michael Abrash, he's a legendary game developer who was responsible for the Quake series and a few other things as well, Windows NT. He had been tasked to start a research group for virtual reality, which I had not worked on before. And he came and he messaged me. He was visiting different universities. He visited CMU. We were scheduled to meet and talk. And unfortunately, I had to cancel the meeting because my daughter was born that day.
Oh.
So that was a near miss opportunity, but we had a mutual friend, and he arranged for us to speak again. And Michael asked me, like whether I was interested in joining, and I wasn't that kind of interested in virtual reality at that time. So I sent him a couple of my projects to see if he was interested in funding it. But before I sent it, I had this thought that, in terms of understanding and connecting with other people, part of the problem is sensing behavior and understanding it. The other one is displaying it, like to actually make a person feel like they're connected with another person. And so that was the prospect about VR that interested me. And so you asked me what photorealistic telepresence is. The intent or the thesis behind it is what you and I are doing right now. We're trying to have a conversation. There are a number of people in the audience. And while this is it's so much better than nothing. It's so much better than, say, chat or audio. But it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing as if you and I were in the room together. I could make eye contact with you. My gesticulations were meaningful to you. I could actually see the audience, see how many of them are sort of nodding off in boredom, how many of them are actually engaged. That's all signal that's very artificial. This interaction is very artificial. I mean, there's so many terms that have come up, Zoom fatigue, and all of these, what do they call it, stir craziness. It's kind of it's the isolation we're feeling. And the last 2 years, more than anything, have demonstrated like how important it is to feel like you're in the presence of people who you wish to be in the presence of. And that's kind of the promise of this area of work, to allow people to connect with other people as if they were there. And so the core kind of intent of the work is to allow people to be with other people who are remote. No matter where they are, it should feel, sound, and look as if you're in the space with another person.
Yes, I think that's so interesting. By the way, there's a slide of Facebook at work. I think you're in that picture also, where you're explaining how people are. There's a photograph of a woman and a man who are talking to each other with the headphones. I don't know if that's you or not, but I've been showing that to a lot of people. I had no idea that was your work. And I found it very interesting because unlike, the usual area of emotional AI, jahan wo trying to decode signals coming from people, aap usko वापस भी wanted to do it the other way too, which is really make it so that you can express yourself back in virtual reality also, which I thought was really fascinating.
Yeah.
I think इतने लोग अब इसके बारे में बातें कर रहे हैं, but one of the big questions is, metaverse में what are the use cases? Because आजकल वो gaming है, Snoop Dogg है, and then there's Mark Zuckerberg's Meta, and then everybody hears about NFTs being sold. But I think, I'd love to hear from you what you think are some of the big use cases at the moment or applications that would come in the coming years.
No, for sure. So the first one jumps out to everyone is gaming, right? People think about. Sorry, can you hear me? Are you still?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I don't know if you seem to be frozen a little bit. I don't know if I'm frozen. Hello?
It seems. No, I think you're back now.
Yes. Okay. Right. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so I was saying, gaming is the first example that comes to everyone's mind, and then there are others that people cite as well, like education is a major one. Seminars like this one, productivity and work, meeting with other people. But to be honest with you, that's not the one that sort of like appeals to me or drives me. That's not the one. Those are not. I mean, all of those are important. They're exciting. There are others like sports and entertainment, but that's not the thing that to me is the prize. The prize is the mundane. This conversation, in a sense, not the content, I hope, is not mundane, but the nature of it is, right? Where we're two people talking to one another, and a group of interested people are listening. Or the weekend chats that you have with family back home, right? Like you just arrange those. That's kind of really servicing a need. People wish to connect. And the fact is that, most relationships that you have, the active ones in your life, are with people who live close to you, who you can meet regularly, engage with regularly. And myself, as I mentioned, I lived in Abu Dhabi, moved to Pakistan, moved to the US. Every time I've moved, I've left behind relationships that are valuable to me, right? And inevitably, those relationships sort of peter out and they decay away. And that's for anyone who moves or anyone who's had someone move from a city. To me, that's the value. The real value of the work we're doing, and the metaverse will allow people to make connections and maintain them personally, professionally, no matter where the other person lives. That's the real promise of it. And I feel like that somewhat mundane example is the basis of what this is going to mean.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way, but that then is very all encompassing as well. It's very foundational, essentially. Lekin if you think about all this, इसमें challenges भी बहुत सारे आ जाते हैं. Like, so there's a question also, really. One is, a couple of questions about technology, whether it's hardware or software. And then I'll have a follow-up question on privacy and things like that. But let's just look at, where do technologically we stand now? And is it really going to be a reality, or is it a lot of hype at the moment?
Right. So when I joined what was then Oculus Research, one of the things that Michael Abrash did, which was very interesting to me, is that he had actually started. Mine is one of many groups within research labs. Now it's called Meta Reality Labs, and the diversity of subjects that we have to research and investigate. It spans electrical engineering departments and computer science departments and mechanical engineering departments. I mean, it's so broad in terms of the challenges, from things like optics, seemingly disconnected. When you think about the field of view inside VR, you may not realize it, but actually your field of view is quite small. Now, how is this connected to social interactions? It's actually fundamentally connected to social interactions, because when you're in a group of people, you use your periphery to look at who's interested, who's paying attention, who's raised their hand, who's sort of looking down, who's turning and looking at you, who's not paying attention. All of it's very important for you to engage with the group. And when you're looking at it with smaller field of view, you don't have the same experience, right? And so optics is one area which is key. How do we get wild field of view? The resolution of the display is key, because I looked at one sort of futuristic display that we were developing and looked at the avatars we had built, the realistic avatars. Mm-hmm. And suddenly you could see kind of the glint in the eye, the detail on the face, and the avatar just popped in terms of realism. People won't see this for many years, but resolution is another key example. You mentioned power, right? Power or like, what's the battery life on the headset? How cool is it to wear? How comfortable is it to wear? How light is it to wear? That's important. Where are the sensors going to be placed? Where do we place those? How do we redesign our algorithms to run on mobile compute? So just on the compute, right, on the headset itself. That's another kind of like critical technology. How do we enable communication across to minimize latency? This becomes very critical, because we've sort of been acclimatized to sort of pauses the interference we just had right now.
Yes.
It was a little bit disruptive, but imagine if it had been your avatar or my avatar in front of you, and that avatar sort of like just started to freeze up. It would be repulsive in a way that would probably discourage people from using it. Mm-hmm. So it's almost across the stack and you notice I haven't mentioned any of the challenges of creating avatars, sensing or driving them, rendering them in real time. All of these challenges need to be addressed. And there's spatial audio. We need to render audio in a way. Finally, and probably most far out, is haptics. Shake someone's hand, exactly, give them a hug. Those sorts of things are probably the most far out.
And what happens when everything is being captured? Because everything you're talking about is more and more detail about the context, about the individual, their voice, their expressions, their touch, maybe if it's haptic, even their heartbeat. कितना कुछ इसके अंदर हम capture कर सकते हैं, just to understand them better and then to project them back in a realistic manner. Again, there's all these considerations about data privacy and the implications of that. And I know that at one point you'd also mentioned that in an article or an interview you had talked about interoperability as well. So एक चीज है कि एक हमारा सारा डेटा हो रहा है वो एक फायरवॉल जगह में कलेक्ट हो रहा है, लेकिन अब मैं अपना avatar I want to take it somewhere else, अब मुझे फिर से from scratch Roblox में या कहीं और build करना पड़ेगा. So when do you see this frictionless world where I can just go from metaverse to metaverse and also have more control over what people are taking from me and using it? I mean, you need it, but only for me.
Yeah, I think this is a fantastic question. It is an extremely deep question, and we've been thinking about it for the last like 2 or 3 years. And to be honest with you, it is every time we spend time on it, make progress on it, you go deeper, and the implications of such technology are very interesting, very deep, and very broad. So let me start by saying, in my view, trust is the medium of communication. So for instance, if you call your mother and you speak with her, anything she says, you believe is exactly what she said, right? Even though what she said is sensed, digitized, packetized, broken up, sent over the internet, reconstructed digitally, you have no doubt in your mind. I mean, there's no sort of doubt, iota of doubt, that what she says is what you hear and vice versa, which is why you use the medium. I think this is going to be true for this new medium of communication as well. Unless there is an ironclad trust from users that what they see is what they hear, and there's nobody kind of like interfering with it, there's no system censoring it, or that is going to be a kind of a critical piece of the puzzle. So on your question of privacy and security, I would add fidelity as well. So these are all kind of important aspects of the same. It's something which we have to design during the process of creation. And myself, in my view, just from an ethical, moral perspective, I think this is critical. But even just from a functional perspective, people will use the medium if they trust it. If they don't trust the medium, they will not use the medium for communication. So I think it's both kind of an ethical responsibility plus, in fact, functionally necessary for this kind of like platform to succeed in the future. Now, your second question, or the second part of your question in terms of avatar interoperability, right. This is going to be very interesting, right? Because like, for instance, as an example, different game studios, when they need to use avatars, they have their own sorts of representations of how they're used. And they don't want anyone externally sort of dictating how it'll be used as well. We may have a particular style in one part of the ecosystem, somebody else may have another style. All of this is not understood. And there are going to be two approaches to this. One is that there will be sort of attempts at architecting this, coming up with solutions for this. And I think it'll be just as we want it to be, an open market where the best idea wins. And over time, the second approach, which is kind of what I'm suggesting, organically, solutions will emerge. They'll start to collect together, and then we'll see solutions, like the right solutions, come about. I think that's going to be the end. I don't think at this vantage point anyone can sit and say we know the answer.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this is a classic case of the more people use it and experiment with it, the more new solutions and possible avenues emerge. But if you think about Pakistan now,
right?
And काफी लोगों ने ये भी सवाल पूछा है. Couple of questions. How can Pakistanis, wherever they are in the world, kind of participate in it? कई लोग students हैं, अब वो सोच रहे हैं कि वो आगे कौन सी चीजें पढ़ें. The others are then entrepreneurs, or they're looking for freelance work. Like, what should they learn? What do you think is the demand for this? And where is the next 1 to 3 years opportunities for them to start leveraging this trend?
Yeah, so obviously the concept of the metaverse, that the internet is going to become embodied, something which you can actually be in as opposed to see. It's speculative, right? It's not there right now, and it is what Facebook, now Meta, is betting in terms of the future, but it's not the future right now. I think the best way I can answer this question is to kind of pose, in my view, what it means. What does this kind of like direction mean? When you ask most people about what the internet is, I think the most common answer is sort of like a repository of human knowledge, right? Like it's a Wikipedia. You want to know the circumference of the sun, you can look this up on the internet, or and so on and so forth. But I feel like that's kind of like missing the context of what is the internet in a continuum of technologies. And where I would place it is with the telegraph, with the telephone, with video conferencing. And what the internet's kind of potential and impact has been is as a communication medium among people through email, through what you and I are doing right now. It's allowed us to connect at a scale we've never been able to do as a species before. And the metaverse is, I think, better thought of in that frame as the next communication platform. That's what the internet is going to evolve into, is going to be another way so we can connect even further, even more kind of like closely across distances. That's why I put it this way, is because then you think about it from a communication perspective. What are the entrepreneurial opportunities that presents? What does that present to, say, the travel industry, to the education industry? We talked about a number of these industries, right? If we revolutionize how people communicate at that scale, what is that going to mean in terms of economic opportunities? I think that's the frame that I would sort of encourage people to think about this as, rather than kind of like an entertainment, like hub where you're sitting around and hanging with people, which is of course going to be one aspect of that. But that, I think, misses the broader point of where this is headed.
I agree with you. I think that it's more than just the games that we see now, although the first consumers are going to be the over 3 billion gamers that are kind of ready and using such and used to such environments. Lekin agar aap, you were saying that there were these professors who came to Pakistan, one professor in particular who came to GIK and MED. And there's a question here, are you looking to collaborate with students in different institutions, or do you visit often, or is there something that you see in the future because what you're doing is so inspiring and exciting?
No, that's very kind. I do retain some connections, though I have to say, like over the past few years, they've waned more than I'd have liked to. In the beginning of my career, I continued some collaborations with Sohaib while he was at LAMS. I was involved like peripherally with the establishment of Habib University when it started as well, and I've had the pleasure of visiting GIK a few times as well. It's a good question. It's a good point as well. I would love to establish collaborations and engage. And if there are folks who are interested, please do reach out.
That's wonderful, and I think this Pak Launch is such a great way for all of us to get reconnected now. To this global community that we have in and outside Pakistan. So we have a little bit of a few other questions also. One interesting question is, now they think of it as a way of communication, as a foundational platform. There are two interesting questions. One is, what about, do you think, and you wouldn't have the answer to this, but have you thought about mental health? Because you were obviously at one point looking at biomarkers, and maybe this is something else that one has to keep an eye on. That is it impacting the mental health of people? Is it causing more alienation at some level than it is? Is it healthy for us to be using this as more and more of a main means of communication?
I love that question. I love the question. So if you ask, the ordinary person what they think about this concept of the metaverse, right? I think they fall into two camps. There's the dystopian camp, which I would say probably is most people. They think about, the metaverse as another in a line of technologies, which isolate people. You think about the teens sort of with their faces glued to the phone, isolating people from the reality around them. That's kind of, I think, the dystopian future of the metaverse. And then the other one is the utopian view, that if we think about how can the metaverse and how can this sort of like design improve real relationships that we've established in the real world with other people, right? How do we let people connect and deepen the relationships they already have if they move away, or if they're disconnected, or even if they have mental health or are not neurotypical in their behavior? And I'll talk about this in a little way. I think both these futures are possible, and in a sense, I expect both these futures will be realized. it depends on us. How do we develop it, right? Us meaning not just Meta as a company, but the ecosystem around the metaverse. Which of these two futures do we want to build towards? Is it one which is in fact designed to isolate and disconnect, persons tether from reality, or do we try to build it in a way that connects people even better, builds upon real relationships? Which is one of the reasons why I push for photorealism so much. Why I say it's really important for us to have kind of avatars that look like you, move like you, sound like you, is that you build a mental kind of map, heuristics in your mind about other people, like your partners, the way she smiles or smirks. You can pull out a lot of information about that, right? You've built a context to it. What does the tone and inflection mean in your friend's voice or colleague's voice? We want to build upon those things and deepen them and keep growing them, even when people are farther away from one another. So that's the utopian view. Now, I will say, like the question about how does this impact mental health, it has important implications, right? I'll give you an example, like body dysmorphia. If you are able to adjust or change your appearance in certain ways, what is the impact of this going to be on a person's mental health, right? This is a question we have to think about. It's a question that we anticipate, and we want to make sure we sort of develop the technology and release it in a responsible way. And then finally, on mental health, I think there are actually many very exciting, to me personally, intellectually, possibilities. So for a lot of people, I'll give an example of autism. One of the challenges with autism is that the folks who are afflicted with it are unable to extract as much social signal as I talked about before from other people. Like it's helpful for them for things to be slowed down, and then they can extract just as much information as you and I can. Now, what does it mean to have the metaverse? It means that we can bring the power of computation to bear on social interactions. We can slow down the interaction computationally on the other side if we want to. We can augment it with information. We can add, a lot of, assistance to people who need to communicate. And what we found historically with technology is that when you build to help folks who are disabled or not neurotypical, it actually makes it easier for everybody else to use it as well. And that's what I hope to see over here as well. That's the other part of this, which is that when we're able to build fully photorealistic interactions, we can bring the power of computation to bear on it. For things like folks who have Alzheimer's, who have memory issues, you can help them remember names. You can help them remember context. You can, even for everyday interactions and meetings, you'll be able to recall, like, okay, let's bring back those notes from that meeting and play back a little version of you and I talking to each other, fast forward and go to it. All those sorts of augmentations that'll come from bringing the power of computation to interactions. So I think that's the utopian view. That's kind of like the power and the promise. It can be either one of these two camps, but it depends on how we build for it.
Yeah, so actually that's fascinating what you just mentioned about Alzheimer's. Pakistan ki average age is 22 years old, lekin the rest of the world is rapidly aging. मैं सिंगापुर में बैठी हूँ, we're aging very rapidly, and my daughter is looking at digital therapeutics and Alzheimer's and trying to detect it through voice. So I think that this is very, very important and interesting that actually that can help that group of people that need it. And the other thing that I noticed was, I'm not a gamer. I don't know if you're a gamer. Are you a gamer? Do you game? Do you play games? You were saying you do play games or you don't? Oh,
I do. Much less now than I did before, but over Zelda recently. So that's our weekend.
Okay. I think that makes a big difference. I think a lot of the people who are dystopian, it's because they've never been in those environments. Whereas people who are gamers actually have a much more positive view because they have been in that environment. They've actually made friends, and some of the more typical biases that we see against gaming, they actually have explained to me that it's actually quite different. So
it is. I agree with this. Yet I say, I think we shouldn't be afraid of technology. In other words, technology is a tool. It depends on how we wield it. And I say we, not in the sense of society. I think technologists who are developing it have a responsibility. Journalists have a responsibility. Policymakers have a responsibility. Individual citizens have a responsibility. But I don't think we should be afraid of technology. We should be actively engaging in it and figuring out how do we shape it so we can extract the best things out of it. And if there are consequences and issues, we iterate rapidly, fix the issues that come up as they do, and anticipate as much as we can.
So there's some more questions. I'm just going through them. I see a lot of questions for you. One of the questions is specifically related to, again, talent in Pakistan. We see a lot of resources getting trained in AI, ML, which Pakistan mein bhi bahut PhDs ho rahi hai. And there's a lot of buzz around more and more people working from Pakistan digitally on a lot of these new trends. Do you see these resources in Pakistan getting utilized, and how can one get more metaverse related projects for these researchers?
I mean, I have to say, like, compared to what the state of things was 20 years ago, I mean, it is so much easier to get started now. Like, there are code repositories everywhere, hardware is available anywhere. And then, in terms of knowledge and lectures, papers, the accessibility today is unseen. The piece of advice I would have for folks is, and this is what I saw, like the lesson I learned at GIK, again at UCF, at CMU, and at Meta, is it depends on who you surround yourself with. If you're surrounded by smart people, both as in three ways: mentors, peers, and folks you advise or you actually mentor or lead. That's kind of the critical thing. And probably the piece of advice I would say, again and again I've seen, is that when you get a cluster of highly talented, smart, motivated people together, the effect is not additive, it's multiplicative. I think this is almost a cliche, I guess, at this point, but that's what I would say, what I would look for is, are we sort of like establishing these clusters of, and this won't happen in a year or 2 years. We'll have to do this for like at least a decade, where we get that kind of depth of talent and have it clustered together. I don't believe I've seen this. I've seen it start and stop a few times, unfortunately, in Pakistan. And to be quite frank, I haven't been following it that closely in the last 5 years. But I've seen it start and stop. The sustainment is what I would love to see happen. Meaning, not just something where we find a cluster, but something where it sustains for maybe a decade or 2 decades, and you see kind of generations of people, collaborating, mentoring, growing, getting some sort of like critical mass together. That's, I think, necessary, and it's hard to kind of form. And it usually forms around key critical people. So that's what I would look at. I've seen a few very positive examples happen, but unfortunately they don't last.
I think the universities and the students, and I mean, there has to be kind of a critical mass. And then, as you said, you have to keep it going. So Yaser, there's some other questions. One of them, I don't even know if this is relevant to your work, but one person is asking about NFTs in the metaverse and what it means for the creators in Pakistan or all over the world, because that's really what the metaverse is getting known for now. Is this kind of NFTs and selling NFTs and having these avatars. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I'll confess right at the start that I have only a passing understanding of it, just as I think, in fact, everybody has, because it's new. Everyone really just has a passing understanding of it. I mean, and NFTs are a way of, as far as I understand, establishing a unique ownership on an artifact, right? A digital artifact. And certainly, like just like paintings, art, avatars will be of that sort as well. I can certainly imagine people building sort of boutique avatars and selling them. There'll be that. Certainly, like people will want culturally relevant avatars. I can see marketplaces emerging over there. It's certainly a possibility. But I'll confess, this is not something which is my expertise or that I spend a lot of time thinking about.
So I guess you're at the foundational layer, right? There's infrastructure, then there's like foundational software, jahan aapka photorealism aa jata hai, and then there are applications on top of that, and then there are creators on top of that. So there's a tech stack basically for the metaverse, and then whoever is interested needs to choose where they find it interesting. I mean, for somebody like me, who my co-founder and I have a data company, that we're always interested in data, how it's governed, how it's secured, how it's understood. Um, but speaking of data, some of the things that people worry a lot about, Meta obviously does as well, is kind of hate speech, crime. And there have been incidents recently, just again, that women were abused in test runs of the metaverse. So iske andar, what is really needed for governance, and who governs it? Is it the owner of the metaverse? Is it the regulatory bodies? Is it facilitators? Like, have you thought about some of that?
Yeah, all of that. The most I can tell you about this is that this is something taken extremely seriously.
Yeah.
And that the discussions happening, I mean, this is something which you had mentioned. The answer obviously is everyone, right? This is something which everybody has to get involved in. I have to say, like, looking at the spread, I have seen good engagement from legislatures in some parts of the world, and that's good to see. Like, some folks are in fact engaging. It seems to be, however, like it's usually lagging. Like the legislature gets involved after the issues emerge, and so I think there's a shared responsibility over here. The issues you mentioned about women in the metaverse or in other kind of social VR applications, they have been well documented. They've been studied in academia for a while as well. There is kind of like a stream of literature, but I will say it's emerging, right? In the more you build, the more functionality you enable, new issues arise. And I feel like for a responsible development, we have to have a way of anticipating testbed, identifying these, triaging them as they're coming within the company and without as well. And that's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, so coming back to that idea of photorealism, a part of the metaverse is also like just kind of games with that, which is it just frees you up also. Maybe you don't want it to be so photorealistic. Maybe I want to be an old man in one thing, and a grandma in another, and a ninja warrior in a third metaverse, and just swap identities because you have like digital fluidity in my identity. So, but is it, I guess, down the road, is that something that you see happening, and would your work apply to that as well?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. And, like you had mentioned that the study of women in the metaverse, one of the big kind of requests is we would love to be anonymous, right? We'd love to be able to present ourselves in an anonymous way so that we don't get, approached or harassed as much. So it's certainly kind of a need over there. Mm-hmm. Now, but again, this brings up many interesting questions, right? Like, how much control should you have over the appearance of your avatar? I mean, if someone says, I would love to kind of put makeup on, or in my case, grow my hair back, should I have the agency to do that? I think generally people would say, of course, what's the harm in that? But then how far do you go? Can I change my avatar to look like Ali's, for instance? That seems very wrong, right? And so what is in fact the boundary of adjustability that's allowable or not? This is something which we have to grapple with. In my view, like this is certainly like adaptation of your avatar is certainly going to be a functionality. It's a question of making it apparent to the person you're talking to, right? Like, is this your actual self? Is this a modified version? It can be done as I had mentioned before, we have to design for it. We have to anticipate the benefits of it, what the costs and implications are, and then design it, make sure people are aware of it, of what they're sort of seeing and what they're using. It's about execution.
Well, and Yaser, what about the fact that you are doing it for humans, but there must be AI avatars as well? Do you design photorealistic kind of telepresence for them as well? Because they also have to make it obvious that they're an AI, for example, right? Which is
it is a future. It is a future. And, like the focus we have right now, you had mentioned where we are on the stack. Right now, nobody in history has demonstrated the ability to have a two-way conversation with an avatar that is completely generated automatically, and it looks like you, moves like you, sounds like you, and you can interact. It's never been done for like the full body with background and everything live. No one's ever accomplished this. What you see in movies, for instance, they're kind of like teams of people minutely designing a single actor's avatar, and then on the post kind of like cleaning it up and adjusting it and making it look perfect. To do this live, it requires kind of a large number of of research breakthroughs. That's what our focus has been. So should people be allowed to adjust and modify? I think that's a future discussion we will have to have. But if I ask someone, anyone who wants to appear as they do, they should have that capability for sure, right? I should have the ability to appear as I want to if I wish to. So that's the foundation. And then how we, put protections, capabilities, enhancements in the metaverse. That's, I think, the next level that we want to build on it. And the focus of myself and my group is on this foundation. How do we actually allow people to appear as they do to other people, and the full spectrum of what your mouth is doing, what your eyes are doing, what your face, hands, and bodies are doing, it gets transmitted without censorship or dropping. That's what we want to do.
And I was noticing there's a lot of companies now that are actually specifically focused, at least in how the face looks. It's photorealism, not so much in how it acts. I think Soul Machines, for example, just raised a ton of money as well. I don't know how much they are good at the kind of behavioral research and projection that you're doing, but definitely this idea that it should look very realistic is coming up more and more.
Right.
So, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, pose your question, please.
Okay, so the next thing is, I just want to make sure that I have one of the questions is on, you had mentioned mobile cameras. Itne log Pakistan mein, they're using mobile. When do you think one could kind of experience the metaverse? I mean, how far are we from experiencing with mobile computing power? And is that something that means that a lot more people, for example, will be able to participate in it?
I think, as with a lot of technology, it'll depend on the marketplace, right? Mm-hmm. In some sense, strangely, some of the infrastructure in the US actually lags behind many other parts of the world just simply because they were first, right? And there wasn't an incentive to upgrade. So I think how it proliferates is going to be interesting. I do feel like, as you had suggested earlier, that there will be, I mean, as with all technologies, an early adopter community, and that'll be small and it'll grow out. I would not speculate at this point, what the usage pattern will look like. It'll likely emerge, if you were to ask me, in the next 4 to 5 years. That it'll become much clearer.
So yes, if you think about yourself, right? You're working on this. It's where do you see the future in the next? You just talked about 5 to 10 years. Your own research. What are your plans personally? And then where do you see the industry in 10 years?
So the most dangerous thing you can do is ask a researcher to predict the future, because we tend to be hopelessly optimistic. So I have a joke with Michael that I had told him I would solve this whole thing by April 2020. And the whole thing with a team of 5 researchers was my projection at that time. So you should take whatever I say with a grain of salt in terms of what to do. My ambition is that the capability of having the ability to have interactions with other people that are fully realistic. That's what I would love to see happen over the next 5 to 10 years. I want to finish that. I want that solved, and I want it out, out and about. Whether this happens or not requires us to solve a number, maybe 5 to 10. We need 5 to 10 miracles, research breakthroughs. Whether that takes 2 years or it takes 20 years, that depends on the nature of the problem. We're learning about it. We'll find out whether these are tractable or not. I've just been I'm more optimistic than usual, because some of the early problems, which had been long-standing, we were able to cut through them quickly. So I'm optimistic, but it might be that we reach the 9th problem or the 10th problem, and that might take 20 years to solve. So I'm optimistic that we solve it over there. That's what I'll speculate on. As far as the metaverse goes, I feel like if you extrapolate the trajectory in terms of computation, graphics, content, tooling, it's going to march onwards to become more and more specialized. And the question is how soon can we get, and how accepting will people be of the instrumentation needed to let them actually embody the metaverse, in terms of displays, in terms of sensors? That's going to be the real question over the next few years.
And that brings us to something, another question from the audience, which is, so given this future, given that problems and challenges exist, what should be a basic curriculum that should be taught in universities for the metaverse of the future? If it's, the Pakistan universities decided, yeah, is a good thing to teach our students.
It's a really good question. I'm very close to my heart. So my plan is step 1, solve photorealistic telepresence. Step 2, start teaching a course on this, and maybe even like I would hope to see a discipline emerge around this space. It's kind of like, I would say, it'll be hard to avoid this in the next a few years. I don't think the right approach is to try to design a curriculum or design a program around it. I would rather say find people. I believe much more in people than these sorts of overarching directions. Find interesting people, attract them, make sure that they stay and they engage on the work. That's the best way to kickstart this. I would be very opportunistic. See who's interested in coming, particularly when they graduate. I would have been much more likely to have moved back to Pakistan. In fact, I wanted to right after I graduated. But once you get embedded, it becomes harder, especially later in the career. So I would certainly say, look for people who are working in the area and get them to start programs at the universities. That's the best way to start.
I'm going to take your course. Other people are also asking specifically, you surround yourself by great people, you find them, but you're really successful as a researcher who's become so prominent in the field. What are some skills or characteristics of being a really good academic / industry researcher that you have noticed over the years would be useful to inculcate in oneself?
I will say, I'm not being humble bragging or anything, but I do think a lot of this is the people I was fortunate enough to work with as mentors. I was very fortunate, and it's a kind of like an edge, like a departure point. Every time you get yourself a mentor who believes in you. Peers, I was very fortunate, and then most fortunate of all are the PhD students, graduate students, and colleagues I have at the lab in Pittsburgh. I think there's just kind of like no substitute in terms of what you get and what you give as well with such folks. In terms of personal characteristics, I don't know how useful it is, but I feel like some attributes are, I get very motivated by problems people don't think can be solved. Like if somebody says something cannot be solved, it is much more exciting to me. And then the moment something becomes obvious that can be solved, it becomes much less interesting to me. I don't know if that is a particular complex or attribute, but that's one thing. The other part is, there are all sorts of advice about be comfortable. I think one which I will maybe poke at is there's this notion of failing, like don't be afraid of failing. I think it's true, but I feel like it glorifies failure a little bit more than it should. I think the idea should be that you are relentless in pursuit of what you want to do. And failure shouldn't bother you, but they shouldn't excite you either. You should be kind of like single-minded about what you're trying to achieve and push for it. That again, I will say, is a luxury which I've enjoyed thanks to, personally speaking, my family as well. They've been kind of supportive about that. That's not a luxury everybody has either. The luxury of time, to kind of fully dedicate yourself and immerse yourself.
I think it's so interesting these days. A lot of what you're saying, actually, we need academics are becoming industry powerhouses. Entrepreneurs are becoming more academic in the way they're approaching things. And so it's very important also for everybody to realize that the lines are blurry, but you need to have depth of skills wherever you are now. And that does take a lot of persistence. And one fails, but as you said, failure. I'm a big believer that failure is just a step on the way. So you have to keep going at it and attacking the problem in different ways. Otherwise, you can just divert your attention. Okay, this is not working.
Yeah, there's one other point I wanted to make was, maybe counterintuitively, I think be helpful to other people. In other words, it may seem like a strange thing to say, but it's it's strongly in your self-interest. Mentors, particularly students as well, they get attracted to folks who have this sort of quality about them. And I myself find myself this way, right? Be useful to someone, be useful to other people selflessly, go out and try to do that, and you will see that's the thing. Be useful. That's the thing which will attract such people to you as well. I feel like that's been a truth.
That is awesome advice. So Yaser, thank you so much. There are a ton of other questions, we've run out of time. That was a fascinating hour. Thank you for your time today. Thank you to everybody at Park Launch that attended. And you can always watch the recording on parklaunch.com, I believe, and Facebook. So wonderful hour. Good luck with everything you're doing. Please keep in touch and let us know when you launch that course. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thank you, Ayesha. Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.